the whole point of this is we need to talk about important subjects as a community, as individuals, as human beings. So this is the second one, because death happens to all of us. Now, I'm going to disclose, for those of you who don't know, that between the time we started planning this program and today, my husband died after a brief 5-day illness that was totally unexpected. So we really need to talk, because I get it now firsthand about why it's so important. It is not something to be avoided. It is something that we have to discuss. So that's today. If there's sufficient interest, we're going to try to get Caitlin back, because I hate to say it, but a bunch of us are like Caitlin groupies, right? How many of you have read Smoke Gets in Your Eyes? Raise your hand. Okay, that's like the best audience participation ever. It's an amazing book, and I read it when it was new, actually. I don't even know how I found it, whatever. I lucked into it, I read it. It's a brilliant book. And it's really an important book, and it's important for, I think, for all of us. So if you haven't read it, read it. There will be copies on sale after her program. Our friends from Avid Reader are here selling the book, and she is available to sign a copy if you wish to buy one. So we hope you'll do that. Otherwise, check it out at the library. Download it. That's what we're here for, okay? That's what we do. And I also... We've launched a website called Let's Talk Sacramento, and it's actually hooked onto our website, and you wouldn't know it has a different name. And it's got resources for people to have these conversations. I mean, I'm not trying to be all Monty Python meaning of life on you. If you've seen that movie where they go into the restaurant and they're like, so, Kierkegaard. It's not about that. It's just about using resources in your community to make your life better, which is what I believe the library exists to do. It's our purpose and mission, so that's why we're doing this. We're still figuring out how to do it, so bear with us. We want to take questions, so I may interrupt our speakers and say, let's have a question, and give the audience time, and I'm going to be running around with the microphone, so I hope that's okay. And so now, survey. Please fill out the survey. You do not need to say the date, the time, or the location, because we know where you are, and we'll take care of that. We'll collect these afterwards, but we really would appreciate your thoughts on today's program. So that's the survey. So now, with no further ado, let me get to the introductions, and I'll move aside because there's not exactly a step here. All right, so Caitlin. There's Caitlin. Caitlin Doughty, right? I've been calling you Doughty, but it's Doughty. Doughty. Caitlin Doughty is, of course, the best-selling author of Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory. And how many of you have visited her YouTube channel, Order of the Good Death? Love it. Okay. And she's a licensed funeral director, mortician in Los Angeles, and she has her own alternative funeral home, Undertaking LA. And, of course... pretty funny.
Thank you.
It's true. It's pretty funny. And links to all of this information and a whole lot more is at letstalksacramento.org, because remember I told you about the website, letstalksacramento.org. So that's Caitlin. We're so excited. Like I said, we're all Caitlin groupies here, so we're very excited that she's here. And Jenny Ebinger is, come on, Jenny. Jenny is an active law enforcement chaplain, and she does this as a volunteer for Placer County, and she's been doing it for more than 10 years. And she assists law enforcement officers by caring for victims of tragedies and crimes. So it's pretty tough work that she does for the huge pay of being a volunteer. Just want to tell you a couple of other things about Let's Talk. We have a Hemingway exhibit coming up in July. We'll have a program called Could Hemingway Get Published Today? I think it's going to be really fun. And if you would please sign up for our newsletter. We actually have a newsletter at letstalksacramento.org. So if you haven't signed up for that, please do. We occasionally get really interesting and profound authors, like today. We we want to know what you want to talk about. That's the other piece of this, because I think it's important. I've already had some suggestions for next year that actually scare me a whole heck of a lot more than death, okay? I'm just going to be honest, but we're going to have those conversations. So truly, email letstalk@saclibrary.org and tell us what you think we need to talk about, because this is your house. We are your library. We want to do it for you, and we want to make sure that we're addressing issues that you think are important to our community. So go for it. Have fun. Like I said, we don't know what we're doing, so I'm going to jump up occasionally and grab the microphone and have you raise your hand. Thank you so much. Welcome our guests, please.
Thank you. Okay. Well, first, can you hear me on this microphone? Okay. I think you should have it where it's a surprise what we're going to talk about. So you have, like I would have to talk about racism and someone else would have to talk about death. I don't actually want you to do that. That sounds terrifying. But.
I have to do one more thing.
Okay.
Sorry, I forgot. You may have noticed we're filming today, and because we're going to be running around in the audience filming, if you really don't want to be on camera, just lean down and tie your shoe and make sure. We are a limited public forum, so move out of the range of the cameras if you really do not want to be on film, okay? Otherwise, please join us. And hey, if you're in the back and want to come a little closer, there are some seats up here. If you're okay, great.
In the splash zone. Come on up.
They want to know if they can take pictures.
Yeah, I'm fine with taking pictures. Yeah. If you get a picture of me though, and I'm like, maybe don't post that one on your Instagram. Like maybe try again, because I'm just sitting here. Just a personal preference. Thank you. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming. I live and work in Los Angeles, so I had to get up very early this morning to come here. So if I get a little loopy at any time, someone in the audience just go like that. And
although I've seen some of your videos, I think you're loopy anyway.
Yeah. Ooh, coming for me hard right away, Jenny. Jeez, just because you work with death. I would love to hear. We were talking downstairs about what it is you actually do. And I would be really interested in hearing a little more about that, because it's really fascinating and a much harder job actually than what I have, which is when there's a tragedy, you go in with law enforcement to the actual crime scene to work with the family. And how does that usually, do you get a call in the middle of the night? How does that work?
Sometimes. Has anybody ever experienced having a chaplain? A few of you have? Typically what we do is when law enforcement gets a call for any kind of a death that is, whether it's an accidental at home or homicide, suicide, and stuff like that, what they'll do, if there's a lot of family that's involved, they will call the chaplaincy and ask us to show up on scene with them. Sometimes we're actually the ones who have to do the death notification, so we always have a law enforcement officer with us at the time. And then what we do is we actually work with the family members to make sure that we can get them stable, get people around them that helps support them until, so that we can go ahead and leave. Some of the things that we'll do is we'll actually sit down and talk with them about different plans for them, explain the process of if somebody's died at home, the reason why we will allow them to release the body to the family versus whether or not they have to go to the morgue at the time. So we do that, and then we also ride with law enforcement officers, and we'll be part of the homicides and suicides and things like that. And a lot of times it's to also be there for the officers because for their mental health as well, but working with the people on scene.
So since this is a Let's Talk About program, and I know you want us to focus on what can happen if you don't talk about death, maybe we should each share a horror story of when people haven't talked about it and something has gone wrong. So I have a whole long list of these, but one just from this week at my funeral home is that we had a gentleman who was indigent, which means he was homeless, essentially, and he passed away, and we got the call to take care of him, and he has 8 brothers and sisters scattered all across the country, no parents, so his next of kin are just his 8 brothers and sisters. Some of them live in the backwoods of Kentucky, some of them live in Canada, some of them live in Texas, and we can't perform a cremation legally until the majority of siblings not only agree on what we're going to do with the body, but sign the proper paperwork. And these people don't have fax machines, or if they do, they don't know how to use them, as we have discovered. And the family has gotten really frustrated. And it's totally understandable, and you have to work with people through these logistics. And really, one of the least glamorous parts of our job is the awful, soul-sucking paperwork that goes with a death. Because I don't want to say the fun part, because no part of death is fun, but being able to lay out the body and have the family come in and really experience something, either with the dead body or to view the cremation or to be there actually digging the grave for the burial. There's something there that's beautiful and transformative. There is nothing beautiful and transformative about state of California logistical paperwork. And you don't want to be doing that after someone dies. And if you can have a way to figure this out, and there are such simple things that you can do, but we were talking earlier about how terrified people are that if they do it in advance, they're calling death upon themselves.
That's so true.
But I was just talking to someone about this last night. If talking and thinking about death called it towards you, I wouldn't have any friends or family left. Because this is what I do all day, every day, and nobody's dying at a quicker rate around me. They're not dropping like flies. So that must mean, from empirical evidence, that that's not actually how it happens. Do you have I'm sure you have even more stories of unprepared people.
Well, I was sharing one with you downstairs that people who have family members who are in hospice. And the thing that I think that was hardest for me was that one of my very first calls, I went on call, and a woman had her husband at home, and he had been in hospice for several weeks, and he was definitely going to be dying very quickly. And when I got there, she said, I'm taken back. And he'd been diagnosed like being sick for like 6 months. And so she knew it was coming, but she wasn't even prepared. She says, I don't even know what to do. So that was hard for me because, here you're dealing with somebody who's in the hospice and they didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So I know that one of the things you talk about, all of the different paperwork that they have to do, but planning prior to it is important. But what I've loved about working with the people at the mortuaries is that you guys are very good about being able to guide them through the different things that they're going to need as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not daunting for them at that point.
Yeah, we try to be. And so part of what I do, some of you may know this, some of you may not, something that's really what my funeral home is about is family being involved in the death care. So as much as a family wants to be involved, we allow them to be involved. And the one thing that I wouldn't actually recommend a family doing is filing the death certificate.
Oh, yeah.
Because in California, we're all on an electronic system, and it's near impossible to do if you're a family. So if you're going to pay a funeral home a couple of $100s to do anything, that's what I would recommend.
I would recommend that too, definitely.
Which is a shame. You should be able to just trundle on down to your local health department and hand it in, but the doctor needs to sign it, the doctor needs to fax it in. It's just a really overtly technological but also antiquated system at the same time. But yeah, so I'm very into family involvement, and what I tell people is that you have to really think about what you can't have. Anything you want to do that's really meaningful and involved usually can't be a surprise. When someone is actually dead, you can't be like, you know what, I think I'm just going to have a magical home funeral, because you wouldn't have done what you needed to do to prepare for that. Right. So everything is about pre-planning, I think, and it's never too soon to start. I see some very young people in this room today, probably because I am a young person. My funeral home gets a lot of young people because their friends have heard about me or what I do. So we actually have a pretty depressing case list at the moment of who
or conversation.
or conversation of who we handle, because young people are coming to us, and that's of course the hardest thing to do. But by coming to us, the family is really saying, we want to be more involved. And by more involved, I mean they can actually keep the body at home and wash the body, dress the body, be involved in that way. They can come to the cremation if they want. They can help dig the grave out at a natural cemetery. And people don't really realize how much power they have around death care.
And I agree with that. One of the things I love is that when I do come into a family that has it all planned out, the stress level is different too. When
Completely.
You have somebody who's dying, or just having a conversation with your family, saying how you want to, what your wishes are. It takes that stress off of your loved ones who's having to make those plans. And so I've gone on scenes where people have actually had everything planned out. The whoever was dying told their family how they wanted to be buried, what kind of service they wanted. They had everything laid out for them. They knew exactly where like life policies were, and some of them even had their funerals already arranged and already paid for. And that alone is so phenomenal, because the people who are left behind are the ones that are having to suffer through all that stress and stuff. And so you kind of alleviate a lot of that.
Yeah, that is such a good point.
Yeah.
So you can have, when I do arrangements, say you have 2 daughters and their mother is dying. You can have 2 daughters and their mother is dying and they haven't done anything, and they come in to arrange a funeral with you, and it's just all tension and weird interaction and family dynamics that I'm not aware of. And then you have 2 daughters who have talked with their mother before she died, and they're just sitting there chatting, like we're at coffee or something, and they're like, Tibetan sky burial, what's that all about? I heard that you can have decompose, how do you decompose in space? We're just interested, because they have that kind of room in their brain, I guess is how I would describe it. They have room to just be curious and involved and present, because they're not in hyper freaked out, what are we gonna do? Are you gonna leave mom on the side of the street if I don't sign this paper mode? Which of course nobody is gonna do, but your brain goes there if you're not prepared because you're so freaked out.
Well, I also realized too that when those things aren't taken care of prior, it's funny what death will do to a family, and the different personalities that come out. And you think everybody's getting along, and then you find out that, not everybody's getting along. So sometimes putting that together actually helps alleviate a lot of that.
Yeah, it's like herding cats to try and get them to agree on something.
Everybody has a different perspective of how they want to be done. And a lot of times they'll do it because they want it that way, but they don't know what the parent or the person who died wanted to have done.
You said that you had an experience with your family that was kind of, do you feel comfortable talking about that?
I've had several.
Oh, okay.
Being in this field, I would say in the last 10 years, it has really put a perspective for me, because I've actually been on scenes with people who have they're not prepared at all. And I've had these conversations with my kids all the time. Every time I travel, I tell my kids, this is where my trust is, this is where my life insurance policy is, this is what I want done, this is who to call. So my daughter rolls her eyes every time I leave to go on a trip, because I say, okay, I've moved the life insurance policy, it's over here. To me, it's important. So my sister, who died about almost 5 years ago, I always talk to her about doing life insurance, because I do this as a volunteer thing, but I also am in insurance. So to me, it was important for her to have a life insurance policy, because she was a single mom, and she had 2 girls that she was raising. And she told me, she goes, I don't want to do it. She goes, because if I get a life insurance policy, I'll die. And so
not how it works.
And she died, and she had no life insurance policy, and I ended up raising her children. So to me, it's like we sit there and we think about that, but we really do need to remember that once we're gone, we're gone. It's the people that are left behind that has to actually deal with all of that.
Yeah. Don't think about your own discomfort. Think of the absolute poop show. This is the library, so I won't use the word I want to use, but poop show left behind.
Yes.
For your friends and your family and your husband and your mother or whoever it is. And my mother has been a really hard nut to crack on this. She's still alive, but she really takes care of all of the bills, all of the logistics for my father. And if he dies first, going to be tragic, but probably okay. If she dies first, I'm just going to have to move home. That's it. I'm an only child. He doesn't know how to pay his cell phone is only for butt dialing me. That's all he knows how to do. He doesn't know how to use a computer. He knows how to turn on MSNBC and watch Rachel Maddow. That's all he knows how to do. So I'm gonna have to move home. And when you put it in stark terms, and be prepared to be rejected the first time you come to your parents or your spouse or your sister or whoever it is, because they're gonna go, oh, that's morbid, or oh, that's weird, or you're bringing death upon our houses by doing this. So you really have to keep coming back and believe in yourself, I guess, which sounds kind of cheesy, but believe in the importance of doing it. Because if you don't have that belief, you'll just crumble under it. You'll think, maybe I am morbid, maybe I am weird, maybe I shouldn't be having this conversation. No, you're the sane one. You're the sane one, you're the rational one, you're the one who's figuring things out for your family. and just be that person and be proud of being that person, because that will shore you up emotionally through the rejections you experience from people around you.
I have a question for you, though. As is the job that you do, does it ever take a toll on you?
Sure, yeah. As I said, in the past couple months, our cases have just been one more depressing than the next. It's sort of like, could we just get a lovely 92-year-old woman in hospice just once? We're getting a lot of younger people, a lot of tragic deaths. And it does take a toll, because especially when we dealt recently with a girl who was an artist exactly my age, who had brain cancer and was just gone in a month, from a totally vibrant vegan, living her life out loud, to dead in a month. And it's someone who you talk to her and you talk to her fiance and you're like, oh, we could have been friends, like very easily could have been friends. And I met some of her friends who could have also been my friends, and it just felt so real. So when you have situations, especially I think that reflect back on you, I know that a lot of funeral directors who have children, I don't have children, but if they have children, working on a child is the thing that reflects most harshly for them. Whereas working with children is difficult for me, but I don't have quite the same connection to it.
It's a transference that we take on.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
How we're able to relate to those people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you can build the proper walls, but it's impossible to completely do that.
Yeah.
And you just have to really take care of yourself and really learn what it is that helps you to stay with it.
I know that with me, it's funny because when I go out on scenes and I'm dealing with somebody who's died at home, I find that I can do really well because I don't have a connection with that person, and I realize that the minute I start hearing family stories, and you start listening to how they love that person or the things that they did throughout, and then all of a sudden that person becomes real to you. So if you only had to deal with the science side of it, it's good because you don't have those connections, and it's just you're just doing your thing. But when they come in and they start telling your stories, it's hard not to connect sometimes, and then you're taking on those emotions.
The message is to never take on any
Emotion.
Stories or learn nothing. There's actually a really fascinating program that I'm learning about now. So in medical school, they do autopsies, not autopsies, but anatomy work on dead bodies. So they'll get a cadaver at the beginning of their medical school career, and over the course of the year, they'll slowly dissect it to learn, and people donate their bodies for this purpose. And traditionally, in medical schools, it's been, Jane Doe number 5, Bob Johnson number 2, like completely anonymous cadavers with maybe a napkin over their face. And so it's been really easy for the medical students to get further and further away from the understanding of this person as a person. And there's accounts from medical school of saying pretty tacky things around the body and pretty disparaging things and kind of making fun of the body. And it's this weird place where they're trying to deal with death, but also having to dehumanize this person. So there's this one medical school affiliate, it's the University of Indiana. And what they're doing now is at the beginning of the year, they're inviting their cadaver families in to meet all of the medical students. They bring in pictures, they bring in home videos, they have a potluck, and they talk about, and it serves two purposes. One, to completely give a backstory and life to this cadaver, and second, to try and train our medical professionals to be able to talk about death better with families. So it's kind of the first...
They're working on the bedside manner.
Working on the bedside manner, exactly. So it's really the first talk they have to have with the family about death, which I think is really, really brilliant. Yeah.
And I noticed that with being in this field, whether it's for you or law enforcement or even chaplains, we tend to get a kind of quirky sense of humor. Because
you mean the gallows humor?
Yes. Yeah. And it's sad, but it's out of necessity to be able to function and to be able to keep ourselves from going into that dark spot in our head, And sometimes we have to do it by laughing or joking around because that's what helps us to survive, with the things that we're dealing with all the time. So,
you ready for a question from
absolutely.
From our people here? Anybody have a question?
He had one. Yeah.
Oh, that was.
Yeah, you mentioned you wanted to be. Excuse me. You had mentioned about being disconnected with the the body. And then the next conversation was getting the medical professionals involved with the family. Isn't there a conflict in that?
I wasn't serious when I said you should completely disconnect yourself from there's that gallows humor of mine. I think that it really, especially, I think with the medical school, working on something long-term, it's easy. For me, every time I get a new body, everything is so fresh, the family is there, I've met them. It's hard to have that disconnection. Whereas even if I wanted to, even if either of us wanted to, that disconnection is just not possible. And I mean, there is, you see it happening in you hear horror stories of there are 24 bodies found in a basement of a funeral home, or 100 sets of cremated remains that nobody's picked up. And you have to just think, okay, that person has been pushed so far and has had so little help for themselves that they've had to completely shut down. But I don't think either of us are in that place. And you really just do learn to balance it. So I think it's a balance between sympathy but controlling your empathy, if that makes sense. So seeing a family and saying and having as much sympathy for them as you possibly can and doing everything you can to help them. But empathy is really being able to put yourself in their shoes and take everything on, and you can't go too deep into that because you just lose your mind fairly quickly, or do as most funeral professionals do within 5 years of starting, which is quit. Yeah. So can't do it.
Okay, another question.
It's hard.
Thanks. So I guess I'm interested in the sort of flip side of that question. So not so much the habits of mind that you too, as folks who work with death all the time, inculcate, but you're talking earlier about the process of bureaucratically preparing for death. Don't have to deal with the forms on day one sort of stuff. But I'm curious about the broader piece of that. Do you find that there are habits of mind and families or people who are successfully dealing, especially with unexpected deaths, that have been more successful, that serve as a cultural or sort of larger personal matter, would make more sense for folks to inculcate, I guess?
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand your question. Is it how we've seen unexpected deaths handled well?
Yeah, I suppose I'm interested in, you talked about the, not quite detachment, but as you were talking about the need for sympathy rather than empathy, say in the funeral home manager and the chaplain. But in the families experiencing death, what have been the more successful habits of mind? Is it the Stoics, is it St. Jerome? How do people do well?
Sure. Do you have any thoughts of that, or do you want me to go first?
I'm still formulating that one.
Okay, sure. I'll just start. Oh, sure. I mean, if you have something right now, and then
I actually
I
do,
can
because my
formulate
husband
too.
died fairly suddenly. And it wasn't like we were morbid. We talked a lot, and because we have a daughter, we lost our son when he was 27 very suddenly. Our daughter, we consciously made the decision, we're putting together a trust, we're going to have all of this laid out, I know exactly what I want, and we talked about it all the time. And we had advance directives, and it was all there, so that when he was hospitalized on December 30th, I was able to go home and get the advance directive because he promised. I took care of all the paperwork. He was supposed to give it to Kaiser, and he never did. So I went home, got it. We were able to have that conversation. And then after he died 5 days later, we knew what he wanted. And so while we're dealing with all of this, and it wasn't like he was a young man and it was sudden. He was in his 70s, but he was very robust. It just made it easier to know, here's the roadmap. All I have to do is go straight here and then do this and then do that. And it's been remarkably easy to sort of cope with all of that, because grieving is different for every person. And going through that part is you're dealing with a lot, and I have a job, and it may be the best job in Sacramento, but still, you have to kind of compartmentalize things. And I think when you've had the conversation over and over beforehand, you're able to do that I don't know what other word to use, compartmentalization, and move forward in a way that it feels healthy for me. Whether or not people think I'm weird is a different story. If they think I'm weird anyway, so that's okay.
I would actually say that, we can't always plan for a death. Sometimes when you lose a child suddenly, or, a parent suddenly that hasn't been sick, that conversation hasn't been said. I think a lot of times people are in shock and they don't know what to do. And I think it's important for, like, when we go on calls like that, we try to help them figure out what their next step is, because, they're not in that capacity to make those decisions yet. But also to be able to find friends and family that may have, gone through something like that, because you had mentioned that you had a friend that helped you, and being able to help somebody who's already gone through it that may be able to help you make those decisions or give you ideas of how to handle things. Because, sometimes death happens and we just don't expect it, period, so.
And people around you want to help so bad when something like that happens and rely on them. I will say something a little more, I guess, personal, which is a way that my life has changed as far as how I deal with grief in bad situations now, which is that I really believe that the only way out is through. And sometimes that means when something happens unexpected and it's difficult, whether it's in your personal life or in someone you love dies, just like belly flopping in the mud and crawling out of it is the only way, because you can float on the top for a little while, but eventually you're going to sink. Because another phrase that I love is grief waits, which is so sinister and so true. Because there's nobody who skips over grief. I mean, maybe it's possible for some people, but for most of us normal functioning humans, grief will absolutely wait. And it's easier to kickstart the process if you get right into it right away when the whole thing starts, and allow yourself to go dark. Allow yourself to not be strong. Allow yourself to get into the muck of the grief right away. If you're in shock and you can't, that's okay. But as soon as it does come up, don't just like push it down, I'm not gonna deal with this. Just get in there and start, because it resolves itself quicker if you do. It's like pulling off a Band-Aid. Just get in there and start, and it may last months, it may last weeks, whatever it is, but you've gotten in there and you've started. And that would be my best advice for someone who had an unexpected death, I think.
Question? Okay. I think you had your hand up for a while.
I read your book.
Thank you.
You're incredible.
Thank you.
Anyways.
You're incredible as well.
Oh, thank you.
I like your dress.
Thank you. So can you talk about the value of being with someone who's died from their death until burial? And also, I wanted to know if you have any stories of any children who have been helpful in preparing a body. You know, maybe it was their grandma or their parent or even a friend or something like that, or brother or sister.
I love children preparing bodies. That's my favorite thing. I guess I have a different set of favorite things than most people. I like chocolate, puppies, children preparing bodies. Yes, so as far as the value of the dead body, so I think the value of the dead being with the actual physical corpse, and I use the word corpse because that's what it is. It's not your loved one. I mean, it is. It's someone you loved, but it's also a corpse. I think it's threefold. The first thing is when you just take the time to really sit with a dead body, three things kind of shift. First thing is that you realize that this person is no longer here anymore, because things definitely physically happen when someone dies. They go down to room temperature. Their eyes start to sink. If you keep them there for a day or two, you may start to see some smells. And what you definitely realize is that this person has left the building. They are gonzo. And whether you believe they've gone someplace else is up to your personal beliefs, but they're gone. And so you really get that and you start to understand that. Second thing is you look at this body and you're like, oh, right, I'm gonna die. This is gonna be me someday. And I have to start thinking about how I'm living my life because this is gonna be me. And the third thing, which someone brought up to me recently, which I think is so profound, is that you can also use that time to grieve all of the other people in your life, whether it's people you didn't get a chance to see when they died, whether it's your children who will someday eventually die no matter what you do, whether it's the fact that all of humanity will probably die out someday, you can have that chance to do that. So I think that the time with the body is some of the most powerful magic available in our society. And as far as children preparing bodies, I am completely for that. I don't think you should force a child to get involved if they don't want to.
We've seen the 3 Faces of Eve. Thank you.
Yeah. By all means, like, also give them some blocks and toys if they want. But there's something that I would absolutely recommend that you listen to. I don't remember the name, but it's also a hospice chaplain. I believe her name is Kate, and she did a story on The Moth. I don't know how many of you are familiar with The Moth podcast. So I think if you just did chaplain, Kate, Moth on the Google, you would find this. And it's an incredible story of how this young girl, probably about 5 or 6, her very best friend in the world, which is her cousin, who was also about 5 or 6, I believe he drowned. And she goes up to his body, and she insists that she has to go in. And they lay him out for her, and she tucks him in, and she, talks to him about heaven, and her parents say, now that's enough, time to go. And she says, nope, I'm staying right here. And it's just, you will pack the tissues because the story is incredible, but it really shows how much children can adapt to that when you give them the opportunity. And when you make it safe for them, you don't make it like, it's a casket, don't go up, children, but you make it safe and loving and a safe space to interact. Children are curious and morbid and weird. They want in on that, absolutely. And don't force them to do it, but don't be surprised or shamey if they really do want to be involved, and help them be involved. Because that, we talked about getting right into the grief, that can really help them do that. It can help anyone do that.
I agree.
Do you have any?
No, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing to see
On
how
my
many
way.
times kids ask questions and people go, oh, don't, no. My thing is that if a child asks a question, I'm going to give them the answer.
Yep.
Because it's better to be honest with them up front than for them not to trust you later on. And I think death is just part of life all the way around, and they have to learn it sooner or later. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
Totally
on that.
agree. What's interesting is that there are no children here today, right? I'm not missing any children. In other countries, people bring their children to my events all the time. And they ask, not that your questions aren't fabulous, but they ask really excellent questions.
They're very direct.
About decomposition and the weird colors and they get into the real physical parts of death, which a lot of adults want to know, but they're not so sure they should ask, but kids don't feel that pressure yet until we put it on them.
Okay, how we doing here?
So I've had different experiences with death. We have a daughter that passed away at 2 months. That was 7 years ago. And my husband and I, we helped dress her, and we had our experience. And then a few years later, I helped with my best friend and helped prepare her mother's body for burial. 2 totally different things. My baby was on just a metal cart in a cold room, and they didn't tell us that we could stay with her alone, that the mortician could leave the room. Having not experienced that, of course, I didn't really ask the questions that I wanted to. We got some time with her, but not what we would have preferred. On the other hand, with my friend, they had a beautiful table. They had, private parts covered, blankets, respectful. It was just a beautiful room. How can we, as a public or your jobs, how can we, how can we inform or just create a good experience? Like you've created what sounds like a wonderful place that I would have loved to have been with our daughter. How can we bring more of those to the public, or how can we educate so more people experience that kind of experience?
It's really, I think especially with women who have lost children and family who have lost children, that's the one that breaks your heart the most when you find out they had a negative experience with the funeral or what's done with the body. Because it's not, adult human is hard to move around, there's a lot of logistics. That baby can go anywhere, and the family can do absolutely anything they want. They can bring it home, they can do anything and take any time they need and be as comfortable as they want. And that, they've been proven again and again to be so healing for the mother especially, to have that time. And it's devastating to hear when that doesn't happen. And I'm sorry that was part of your experience. And I think it just comes from people like you now knowing that there is a difference. And we were talking about this earlier, with your sister, you can now go out there and say, this is what happened to me, this is how it can be different. now I know the laws, now I've experienced this, and I've seen the promised land. It's different than what I have experienced and what you may have experienced. And we need so many more people working on this. And a large part of my job is kind of movement building. And it's not the most glamorous part of my job, but if there's no movement and people aren't seeing it as a movement, then the media doesn't cover it, then people don't feel like there's a place they can go, they don't know what to Google, they don't know what to research. But the more that we, sing like the choir we are, the more people will automatically know that there's something more that they can look into, that they can demand, that they can ask for when someone dies. So I wish I had a perfect answer, but really what it is just creating more advocates and creating more people like you who have had this experience and can speak to it. And anytime now someone dies, you can say, you may have plans already, you may have thought about this, but if you haven't, can I share with you some things that I know about this?
I agree with you completely. I think it's important, especially now that we're talking about, having the conversations with our family and stuff. Why not calling the, mortuaries and asking what their rules are? Because to me, my thing is that sometimes we just don't realize the things that we can do or that we can push for. And a lot of times we're not our own advocate. But if we don't know what's out there, like, reading your book, I didn't realize there were certain things that we could do. So I think it's important for us to research and call and find out what their guidelines and what their rules are and how much they would accommodate you. I think that's important so that you can have the kind of, end of life or death or burial or anything like that you want.
Yeah. And if a funeral home doesn't want to tell you, that's not the funeral home for you.
Right.
And also, it's okay to say, is that the law?
Yep.
And if they say yes, it's okay to say, show me or cite it. Sorry, I'm a librarian, I'm going to do that.
No,
I have a question here.
One thing we haven't really talked about is the long, slow process of death of a person who is in a facility, for example, for a long period of time, and we get involved with some of the pressures of the facility, the medicalization, I would say, of our long downhills. And I just wanted to reinforce what you said about having the conversation in advance. My mother, I had a conversation in 1993. My mother died in a facility in 1999. She'd been there for 18 months. And at the end, or near the end, there was a lot of medical pressure for nutrition and hydration and things like that. And I went down and got my mother's, what she had written down in her own words. It was beautiful. I read it to my sister, and that relieved my sister of the pressures, I would say, from the medical facility. And we were able to do what my mother wanted. And it was just a wonderful thing that had a difference between two siblings resolved entirely by the mother because of what she said.
Yeah, that's great. That's the proof that you were talking about. You could actually show the proof, and it changed things.
I think
That in action.
When you plan like that and you have those conversations and stuff, it becomes more beautiful and more connecting with your family members that are involved. So it becomes more of a bonding experience instead of tearing a family apart.
Yeah, and I should say, it takes about 20 seconds to Google California Advanced Directive. Download it. Takes about, it takes probably about 20 minutes to do, because you do have to think, do I want to donate my organs? You have to think about a couple of questions. You have to think about who you want to be in charge of your body, but it will be 20 minutes well spent. And when you're done, it feels good. Eat a brownie and treat yourself. Be like, wow, I really did something profound and important for myself and my family's futures today.
Yeah.
Great job, me. I didn't just watch Netflix. I did something, and it feels really good.
Yes, I'm the former coroner of Sacramento County, and a couple of points. One, you haven't discussed it yet, but the anger around death, and it has a lot to do in terms of the deputy's death notification process, where you're on scene and you're trying to get the information you need, and how angry people are on unexpected deaths. I'm talking about motor vehicle accidents, especially like if a drunk driver is involved, or child's death, or the victims of a homicide. Tremendous amount of anger, and I've had my deputies attacked and scenes destroyed because of that anger. So it's a real human emotion, and it bubbles to the surface. The second thing, just in terms of points of information, it's surprising how many people have second families that the first family doesn't know about.
I've had a couple of those.
Yeah,
Yes.
so think about that when you're with your first and or second family.
It makes it so awkward.
A lot,
It really does.
a lot of people get very angry about that. So if
Yes.
especially we worked with Chaplain Mindy and Frank Russell,
Yes.
and they were very, very helpful. It's interesting too, the change in religious philosophy that takes place around death. Some people blame God, some people seek God, whatever culture
true.
is involved. So anyway, those are just a couple of points I wanted to mention.
You're
Super
right.
interesting. Have you seen anger
Yes.
on the job? Do you
Yes.
have any particular
I've had a
tales
few, I've had a
of-
few swing at a officer. We've actually had a few pass out. So there is a lot of, especially the unexpected ones. It's pretty devastating when you show up on the. I never like having. If I go visit my friends, I never show up in this because I don't want them to think I'm coming to tell them. I think Kathy's told me that a few times. Don't show up on my doorstep in that uniform. So it's not a pleasant time for us to have to go in and tell somebody that their loved one has died. So we have all ranges of emotions. I remember one of my very first calls. I went out with an officer and I was in training, and we had to deliver to a sister that her brother had died, and they were very close. And she's sitting at the table and she's just staring, and he's just going on and on and on and on. And I finally had to put my hand on his arm and said, "She's not listening." She was just completely stonewalled. She just couldn't get beyond. And we just sat there and we were quiet for a minute. And then all of a sudden she just started bursting out crying. And then I looked at him and said, "Okay, now you can." We just have so many different emotions when we have, somebody who's died and we've been given that. So yes, there are a lot. I had a woman who was, her son went before me because they were a Hispanic family, didn't speak much English. So the son had actually witnessed his brother in a fiery crash. And we had to go and tell his mom. And I was trying to explain to him, let us go together, bring her out, let's her sit down. Well, she came out down the hallway, and he's telling her in his language, and she just collapsed. And I had to get her up and on the couch. So we never know how people are going to react. There's just a lot of different emotions.
Yeah. And one thing a funeral director learns within the first couple weeks on the job is that anger can come out of nowhere and strike you. And it really is a weird feeling because you're going along and you're the funeral director and you're doing the very best, or coroner or whoever, doing the very best you can to explain this process, and you're good at your job and you are, and then all of a sudden someone is full on screaming at you with anger because they've decided that the certified death certificate's taking a week longer because of the county is something that you're doing to them. And it's misplaced anger.
Personalized.
Yeah, it's misplaced anger, but it's hard, speaking of not taking things on, that's a really hard thing not to take on. When someone has lost their wife of 70 years, and then they're telling you what an incompetent young nothing you are, and then later apologize profusely, but in that moment, you just feel like the worst person in the world. And it's really hard not to take that anger on, but death is the best of times and the worst of times as far as people's personalities. And you get people doing amazing, open, heart-open Buddhist soul things, and then you get them being their worst selves, and you don't know who's going to show up that day.
Or cracking jokes.
Or cracking jokes, yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I've learned through being a chaplain for 10 years is the emotions that we have, and that there's no right or wrong way to grieve. There's no time limit. And then the one thing that I feel is the most important part of the grief process is laughter. Because laughter really does help us to go through all of the emotional part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've been doing this publicly for 5 years, and laughter is kind of the core of a lot of what I do.
Yeah.
And people always comment on it, but nobody ever has a problem with it, which means that there's something a core in all of us that wants that.
But I do come across quite a few people who think they feel guilty because they can laugh.
Right.
And I always reassure them that that's all part of it. You
Mhm.
know, it's all part of that grieving process that we have to go through that
Yeah,
portion of
because
it.
death is comedy and tragedy
is.
at the
I
same
agree.
time, each one of them.
Well, every family has some funny stories to tell about their family when they die.
Yep.
you
Or
know?
their second family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not good.
That was good. I have a
true.
question here, and we'll get. I'm so happy that you all have questions.
Hey. Hi, my name is Amber, and I kind of have two questions. The first one is just I am a women's studies major, and I saw your video on YouTube about death and feminism. And it was interesting because my final paper for my BA I did on death and feminism, and I did kind of the idea of consent after death, being that I know in other cultures and things, when we talk about death and we know what we want, we can tell our family members what we want. But here in California, you have to have an advanced healthcare directive, a trust, a living will, some sort of proof, and a lot of people have a hard time making the connection of putting it to paper rather than, I know what we want, but when we get involved with the institutionalization of death and things like that, it gets more difficult. And then I also did a project on the marketplace of death, because I actually went through Fresno and went to every single funeral home and priced out every single thing, because it is an actual marketplace. You are going in and things cost different prices, and it can really affect exactly what kind of final rights you want to give your loved one, whether or not you can afford it, if there was, life insurance or not. And so I was just, I have a million questions surrounding that, but I was just thinking this is a very appropriate forum, but it is the education that I'm worried about. And I think, forums, do you think this should be talked about in schools by more healthcare providers? And do you think there should be kind of when we talk about general education or things like that, something like this should be talked about because it is a part of life? And then my second part of the question is just, I'm a crime scene cleaner. Sarah, are you here? my supervisor's here too, and she really
Multiple
loves
crime
you.
scene cleaners.
But
Good.
we do crime scene cleanup, and so we experience death in a different way. We go into people's homes in the community after a tragedy happens, and we're actually cleaning up these things and dealing with the families. And I was just wondering if you knew any sort of historical, just kind of originally who were the people who cleaned up after traumatic events that happened in towns or in families, and are there any resources or subjects that you two know about that are available?
Well, first of all, there's people in the audience today who could just have their own hour-and-a-half long program. Easy. Just have one of these every Sunday. This should be let's talk about death, year, maybe, at the library.
The year of death.
The year of death. Hurrah. I'll answer the first one.
Yeah.
And then, so I would say, first thing I would say is that this is probably not going to surprise you. I think that in high school, there should be a semester of sex education followed by a semester of death education. And that should be your junior year. That's a thing you have to have. And just because these are things that are happening, they're not algebra might not happen in your life. But sex and death are very likely to happen in your life. And these are things you need concrete facts and understanding the bureaucracy and all the things we're talking about. And so as far as the marketplace, something really interesting is that when the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, came in and put down the funeral rule, which says that each funeral home is required to give out their price lists if somebody asks. So you have to tell a person, and each price has to be individualized. You can't have big packages like the luxury loved one package and not tell them what's in it. But what they've found since then is that that's a good step, but they did all this predicated on the idea that people would price shop when somebody died, and people don't, which is why there are funeral homes like the big corporate funeral homes, which will just be, for the exact same service, a good $4,000 more. But nobody knows that because they go into O'Malley & Sons, which was taken over by the big corporate funeral home, and they heard that they knew that aunt went there or dad went there, so they're just going to use them again, without knowing, because they don't call and they don't price shop, that it's $4,000 more for the same service. And so there has to be a way, and there are a lot of companies now that are trying to do online pricing and trying to do, have a way, almost like a true car for funerals, like a company has to honor the lowest price type deal. And yeah, I mean, I think that's all beneficial because we do really need to know what people are charging, especially if it's the exact same service.
I kind of want to go back to the schools. I know, I'm not sure if Sacramento County does it, but in Placer County, we've actually started a program where it's called Every 15 Minutes. Has anybody heard of that? Okay, yeah. To me, that's been very impactful.
Wait, can you explain? I don't actually know what that is. Can you explain
every
what that
15
is?
minutes is what we have. Different schools decide that they want to do this, and we actually create a scene where there was a drunk driver that caused a death. And we bring all the kids out to the stadium, and what we do is we actually have they have a car with kids that are staged, where they've actually flown out of the front window, but they have it covered up, and so when everybody's sitting down, they actually take it off, and what they do is they walk them from the very process of what happens, the DUI and everything. But what's unique about this whole thing is the fact that during this whole entire time, there's kids who have chosen to be part of the death process, and they have certain people that are going and taking these kids out of the classroom, so they're having an empty chair. And so what they do is that they take all these children that are part of the death process, and they put them in what they call a kids retreat. And this is all done in high school. And what they do is they have them write letters to their parents, which is very emotional. I've been a part of that, and it's been very emotional. And then the parents' retreat is actually writing the obituaries. Oof. So I think it's unique because it teaches the kids about death and what it does to the people that are left behind. And then at the next day, what they do is they actually bring in the auditorium, they actually have a funeral service. And they have a casket, and they have all the kids there. They have kids who get up and they talk. They have guest speakers that come and talk about, the process of death, but just, like DUI checkpoint, the DUIs and stuff, and how it affects people. But it's very emotional, and I would say that most of the kids, are really emotional, and you can see it because a lot of them are falling apart, because at some point somebody has actually dealt with somebody dying, whether it's DUI or just at home. So that brings up a lot of stuff. So to me, that was pretty impactful for them to go through that.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question over here.
As you say, as far as the crime scene cleaning, I don't actually know the full history of that, but I would imagine it was just the family themselves or the community. But I don't really know if there are any papers on that or anything.
You said that you do crime scene, but do you guys have a company that does it? I know that Placer County, when we are on scene, we'll call people out.
Is this Aftermath? Is that that's the name of the company, Aftermath?
Okay, yeah.
Hopefully none of you need them anytime soon.
But you find that there's a lot of people who do it on their own because they can't afford it. And what most people don't realize is their homeowner insurance will help that. Even rental, even if you're renting.
Okay, we have a question back here.
More you know.
I've been online. I've seen more information and resources about donating one's body to a med school or to science and study. I've got a lifelong medical condition. My wife has a really rare disease, and we're interested in seeing to it that our remains, our bodies, get to specific sources of where research in our particular conditions can be done. I'm not seeing a lot of information online. I was wondering if you had any directions or any resources for that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, and what most people don't know is that if you donate your body to quote-unquote science, it's probably a private company that you have no control over what your body is used for. It could be, weapons testing. It could be curing cancer. You don't know. It's a bit of a crapshoot. But it helps, obviously, if you want to donate your body directly to a medical school. But I spoke to someone recently who I believe she also has a rare brain condition, and she found a specific professor studying that specific condition, and he was like, yes, I would like your body and brain very much. And they have specific companies that actually know a girl who does brain removal. That's her job. She goes to specific bodies and removes the brain and packages it and sends it to be studied in a specific way. So I don't have a direct cause of action, but I would say, you probably, if you've had the condition, you know who the people working on it are, and you know where the academic papers are coming from, and you know what any information that is available is coming from. So directly contacting that, Dr. Such and such at Stanford or Dr. Such and such at MIT and offering up your mortal remains after you die. And if they don't know, they might know someone who would want them.
And dare I say it, that might be a role for a librarian. It's what we do. We can help you research that.
There you go.
We can't tell you, but we can tell you where to
That's
find
now
it.
my answer to every question.
Ask a
That question,
librarian.
I'm like,
right?
there's
We
a
wanna do it.
librarian for that.
We're going to try to get to all the questions. So,
I had another question about the financial aspect of death. I actually got into a really interesting conversation with a patient of mine who works in a mortuary, and as a healthcare provider was sort of stunned about the things that I just didn't even know existed. I mean, part of that I will attribute to being relatively young and not having to dealt with death on the more personal side, fortunately. But we got into this amazing conversation about burial insurance and how a lot of people will spend a lot of money on that, not realizing they can go straight through either the funeral home or the mortuary, and that there's a lot of times trusts set up through them that can really help with a lot of the costs. And I was wondering obviously, that not being my business, this is like a very, very watered down version of what we discussed, but it was just interesting to know, and I'm wondering if you could expand on that a little more too, because that was something I had no idea about.
Yeah, sure. So I think what you're talking about is what's called pre-need, which basically means that you go to a specific funeral home and you pay in advance or make payments in advance for your funeral. I think that that's really something that we don't offer it at our funeral home. The reason we don't offer it is because I'm not a strong believer in it. But if there are people I know who feel a great deal of relief after this, especially if it's a less expensive item, like a direct cremation, a simple cremation. And when a family goes in and they're older and they pay for it, they come out just feeling great. They're like, my kids aren't in charge of this now. There's this huge weight off of my shoulders. And so if you really want to do that, absolutely do that. But what I would say is that there are often cases where a family will pay and it will say it will be fully paid for this whole service, and then they'll go in at the time of death and but it doesn't include opening the grave. Like, we do have to dig up the grave, and that's another $1,000. And, we didn't tell you that the casket that you ordered is no longer available. So you could get this one, it is an extra $1,500. So things like that. And there are also problems, they're put in big trusts, and trusts don't always work out and survive the way you want them to. And what if the funeral home goes out of business? So my funeral home, we prefer to work on a case-by-case basis. And that doesn't mean that you can't do our paperwork in advance. That doesn't mean that you can't figure out everything you want and the prices that you want in advance. But we just don't take any money from you until an actual death has occurred. But if you really do your research and you know your funeral home well and you feel like it's something that would be really a weight off your mind, get a pre-need and start making payments on it.
Sounds like for cremation, it would probably be easier for that kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I would think it would be harder to do it the other way.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions about the marketplace. Do cemeteries work with single mortuaries? If they've got a mortuary in-house, will they accept a body from other mortuaries and from out of state? And the second question is about dying alone. I moved here many, many years ago from the East Coast, and I don't have any children, and I'm a single guy. And how would one make sure that one's body got dealt with properly?
Yeah, those are good questions. Maybe I'll do the first one. So as far as the, sorry, what was your first question? I had an answer, and then you did the second one.
About the cemetery.
Oh, the cemetery, yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Cemeteries can't have exclusive deals with mortuaries. So a lot of places will be at what are called a cemetery mortuary combo, which means it's, Mount Oak Cemetery and Mount Oak Funeral Home existing on Mount Oak Cemetery. But we don't own a funeral home, but we can we can go to any cemetery we want. If they have plots available. We only do natural burials, so there are actually only a few cemeteries that we work with, but we would refer to someone if they wanted that. But yeah, it's not exclusive to one cemetery. And burial, they're actually, in some states, you can't even have a own a cemetery and a funeral home at the same time. They want to specifically kind of like antitrust-wise keep them apart, which is not a terrible idea, honestly.
If you died at home and you don't have children and stuff, typically a lot of times the officers will try to find your next of kin.
I said die at home. I said
Just
alone.
Die alone.
Without a spouse or without children.
Correct. Well, they're always going to try to take and find the next of kin, whether it be a sibling or a parent, if that parent is still alive. If not, they usually go to the morgue. And you could probably, what happens actually when they don't have somebody?
Well, there's always an extensive investigation regarding finding the next of kin. There's usually some relative someplace, and the deputies are trained. We have access to a lot of different data banks that can work to find family members. If there's absolutely nobody, then we keep the body up to, depending on the county, and it sounds funny with the amount of room in the morgue, we keep the body up to a year, sometimes over a year, and then we have arrangements with local cemeteries, and once or twice a year we will bury the body.
Okay.
Okay, and then also I would say, the beauty of the advance directive, which is the simple form I was talking about, is you can give your dead body to anyone you want. So a friend, a colleague, just anyone that you trust to make your funeral arrangements, you can assign that to and tell them, so it's not a surprise. But it doesn't have to be someone in your family. It doesn't even have to be a friend. It can be a lawyer. It can just be somebody that you trust to make those arrangements for you. And then if you're worried about it, you can maybe prepay, maybe just set aside a certain amount of money that you know it's going to cost, and just make it clear to that person who's named in your advance directive, this is what I want, this is where the money is, let's make sure that this happens. Can you do this for me?
Was that the question? I heard a slightly different question.
So that was pretty much the question.
Okay, good.
The advance directive, that's like part of the trust, part of a package of setting of a trust and an
Right.
advance directive.
Right. It's specifically for your dead body. Yeah. So it's the advance directive for healthcare, which means they're in charge of you right before you die and then also after you die. And it's different depending on your state, but that's what we have in California.
You mentioned natural burial, and can you explain what that means?
Sure. So what natural burial really is just burial. It's what humans have been doing for tens of thousands of years. It's somebody has died, let's dig a shallow hole in the ground, put a shroud around them, body goes in, decomposes. But at a certain point, cemeteries became very interested in what is now called traditional burial, even though it's only been around for about 100, 150 years, which is a chemically embalmed or preserved body, which then goes into a sealed casket, which then goes into a concrete or metal vault underground. So when you think about being buried, you think about being in the earth. But at most, the vast majority of cemeteries in the United States, no dirt is coming anywhere near you in this scenario. And most people aren't aware of that. So you really, if that's something you're interested in, would be to decompose naturally or get a green or natural burial, you really have to search out those places in advance.
I'd like to have your opinion on having an open viewing of the corpse as opposed to a closed casket with a beautiful picture of the person. Because usually that's the last remembrance of that person, when the cold body is dead. And when you think about that person, but it's the truth. If anyone has ever been to an open viewing, you think about that person right now, you think about the cold body that, as you said, is not the person, but that's what you remember. And is that for kids too?
Yeah, I mean, I have a really, do you have a thought on this? I have a strong opinion on this that I will now share with you, if you don't have that.
Well, I personally want just a memorial, but I do realize that people who have open caskets, a lot of times it's because they need closure.
Yeah, so what open, really, and I was actually talking about this with someone last night, what open casket has come to mean is the idea of, as we were talking about, an embalmed body, a body that's been chemically preserved. They'll be in a nice suit, they will have makeup on, mortuary makeup on of some sort, and you walk by the casket and you kind of get your 20 seconds to be like, hi Bob, You know, how's it going? And for a lot of people, that's not really working for them anymore. If you ask the funeral industry, that's the foundation. That's what they're built on. So they cannot financially afford for that to not work for people anymore. And so they are very desperate to hold on to that, and which is why they're not huge fans of me, because I happen to have a different opinion, which is that I believe very much that you should see the body, but I believe that you should see a natural dead body that has not been chemically altered, that doesn't have makeup on it, and you should be able to see it over a period of time, which means you should be able to go in and say it was your mother. You should just be able to sit with her. She was laid out, looks kind of asleep, but also pretty dead, and continues to be dead over the course of 5 hours, over the course of 10 hours, over the course of a day, however long you need until something kind of shifts in you. And this happens again and again. And you can argue that people who come to my funeral home, they know what they're getting into and they're self-selecting. You know, we don't just pick people off the streets and say like, sit with a corpse, congratulations. These are people who are already seeming like this is gonna be meaningful to them. But again and again, we find that they call us after a certain amount of time and say, you know what, it feels like it's time. I've sat with her, I've had my time, and something feels different now, and I'm ready for you to come pick mom up. So that is my personal belief for where we should be going in the funeral industry, which is technically open casket, but there doesn't need to be a casket, there doesn't need to be preservation. I believe in seeing the dead body, but I don't necessarily believe in how it's being done now.
Okay, we have a question back here.
I like that.
Really try to get to all of you, I promise.
Hi. So I have kind of a contrarian question, because I feel like the reason why we're having this talk is because death is a really strange and kind of taboo subject, and we try to shove it to the corner as much as possible. But I feel like that reflects also on like the lack of talk that we have towards life and what kind of life we want to live, and whether, you know, if somebody is sick for a long time, we try to do all these things to extend their life, like regardless of how it feels to them or how terrible it can be to their bodies. So I just wanted to know, like, your opinions on why that is, and what can we do better as far as also like taking care more of life, and what kind of beautiful, meaningful lives we want to live while we're still alive.
Mm-hmm. Like, I have a 10-second answer for that. It's easy and simple, and we'll solve everything. Yeah.
Well, it is funny because I have to say that when I go to a home or just anybody that I have to do a death notification on, I start hearing a lot of the family history or the conflict within families. And I hear a lot of times the estranged relatives and stuff, or, you know, children that are estranged. But when they all come back together, I always hear them say, why were we separated? Why did we allow this to happen? And if I've come from any of this, from being a chaplain, I've realized that life is precious and valuable. And we have to be careful about allowing offenses and things to divide us from our loved ones. Because once someone dies, you can't recoup that, you know, that time with that person anymore. So that's how I feel about it.
There's a good quote, which is that the meaning of life is that it ends. And in pushing away conversations about death, we're pushing away conversations about life in equal measure.
Yeah.
And I don't think people always make that connection. I think that they tend to talk about death as morbid, or engaging in it as morbid. And, you know, here's me, long suffering, like, don't you understand? This is the most important thing you can do for your life, is to have this conversation. And like you were in your question earlier about how once the conversation was had and it was in the advance directive what your mother wanted, that she didn't want months of being force-fed through tubes, and the proof was there and that conversation had been had, it changed her end-of-life experience, and it changed what she was able to have. And I was talking to a friend the other day about how when his grandmother died, she only spoke Spanish, and she was in her bed at home and she was starting to fail, and they called an ambulance to bring her in, and she was just banging her cane on the floor, and she just did not want to go. She wanted to die right there in her bed, and they wouldn't let her do that. They took her to the hospital. And these stories are awful, but then you get the person who's actually in charge of your healthcare, which is your daughter, who says, we need to help mother no matter what. I can't let her die. I can't fail her. And if you haven't had that conversation, that's what's going to happen. And if you don't have an advance directive saying what you want, that's going to happen. And sometimes it actually really helps to imagine the worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario is completely possible if these conversations aren't had. And it really, you don't want, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. So I have an organization called the Order of the Good Death. And some people have a problem with the phrase good death. It's not my phrase, it's been around for hundreds of years in popular use. But I like it because when you think about a good death, you think about, what is it you want? Do you want not a lot of medical information or intervention? Do you want to die at home in your bed? Do you want to have everything taken care of with your will and your estate? That's great. It's not if you don't get all of those exactly right, you failed and it's a bad death. Now it's terrible and awful. But if you don't think about what a good death is and you don't think about what that is, you're not going to get any of that stuff done. If you don't have some sort of ideal in mind, if you don't have some sort of sense of what a good death is, you're going to definitely have a bad death. There's no chance for you to have a good death if you don't think or talk about it at all. It's just not going to happen. So it's still a goal to have, I think. That was a rambly answer.
No, it was a great
Apologies.
answer. We have a follow-up question here, and then I'm going to get over there to that side, and I know you've been very patient. And we have about 8 minutes left.
Oh, okay. And we'll be around, right? We'll be lurking outside if you...
I was curious about with donation of the body or organs, what happens to the body that isn't put into use?
It's generally cremated. It's either cremated or in a lot of medical schools they have something called alkaline hydrolysis or aquamation, which, pro tip, I actually think is the future of how we dispose of our bodies, because it's, some people call it water cremation, which is not really what it is because cremation is inherently fire, but aquamation is high heat water and the chemical lye, and it kind of flash decomposes the body down to something similar to cremated remains. And it's only legal in something like 7 or 8 states right now, California not being one of them. But it's used in the Mayo Clinic, at UCLA, and all of these medical schools to take care of the bodies after they've been donated for use. So if it's good enough for all of these high-powered medical schools, it's probably okay for the general public. But that's either done or it's cremation generally. But I think in some cases, if you really want to have it taken to, a burial place, you can have that as well.
Okay.
But generally cremation.
Sorry.
Regarding natural burials, I'm on a public cemetery board, and there are actually no laws against natural burials, but there's liability and employee risks of the non-morticians who bury the bodies in public cemeteries. So hearing that you promote that, is there any way to have allies, create an alliance between private and public cemeteries to create change in this field because of the liability issues? And you said you have people digging bodies and digging the ground, and for liability issues, that's like, oh, we can't have people that aren't employees, and
right.
that kind of thing. So I need guidance, and I'd love to see some alliances being formed. The whole state is watching what we're doing as far as public the policies and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you should start an alliance. First of all, you seem very interested in this, and we need you. I would say, yeah, most people don't understand that the reason that you can't just bury a body in a hole in the ground at the cemetery is not state law or it's not national law, it's cemetery policy. It's cemeteries, what they don't want is because if you have a body that's just in the ground will sink and shift, and so it's hard for their industrial backhoes and mowers to successfully keep their very pristine, astroturf grass going. So it's really, we have to get people more educated, and we have to get more consumers demanding it, and we have to do exactly what you're saying, make it clear to cemeteries what they could do, because their cemeteries, normal cemeteries, more traditional cemeteries are terrified of these things happening and what it could mean and what's going on. Some aren't. Some are incredibly open to it and have opened natural burial sections in their cemeteries. And that's actually the one that we work with in Southern California, where you have to drive 2.5 hours out to Joshua Tree to bury your body in a hole in the ground. Wow. Which is embarrassing and strange. But, yeah, I'd love to hear more about what you're doing and what you're planning to do. That's great.
Again, in regards with the natural burial, I've heard there's also like green forms of like embalming fluids, and I was just wondering what's your opinion on using those and utilizing that in the natural burial system as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there are, natural embalming fluids which can temporarily preserve a body in a more green manner. We don't use those at our funeral home because there just hasn't been a need yet. But I think it's an interesting way for funeral homes to transition. You know, if they're still like, well, we still need embalming, like we can't not, charge for embalming or have embalming, we still need to do it. To be able to offer a green fluid that then can allow the body to not, because there's still, when embalming first started, it was arsenic that they used. And there's still arsenic in the ground in old cemeteries like you wouldn't believe. And when they talk about natural burial, people are always worried, is the corpse going to get into the groundwater? No, but the formaldehyde can, that's in there. There's no like corpse juice that's like leaching out. That's not what happens. The body, the soil takes care of that so well because it's an organic material, but doesn't really do that well with formaldehyde. So I think it's a good step. I think that some of us would like to see it just not like small greenwashing things or like Clorox presents green bleach sort of stuff. But at the same time, like it's a good step, and it's a good like hand-holding step, and it's a good option, especially if you have to ship the body, for instance, to another state or to Germany or to Lithuania or wherever it's going. I think it's a good thing in general. Yeah.
Okay, we have one last question, and for the people who didn't get to ask a question, I'll apologize, but Jenny and Caitlin will be around for a while. Caitlin will be signing books. We'll try to get to your questions, but here you go, so make it a good one.
No pressure.
For the at-home care after somebody's died, do you have policies in place for when they're like a donor or gunshot wound to the head? Are you making minimum preparations for those families, or just saying, oh, put the donor in the bathtub? I mean, how are you laying them out at home? How's
Yes,
that
the
work?
policy is definitely put the donor in the bathtub. That's the first thing.
It's gonna leak.
Big bucket of ice, yeah. No, that's not what we do. So far, most of the, so first of all, what we've found is that we thought we were going to be doing a lot of home funerals where we go and help the family do everything at home. Turns out we don't really do that much. We tell the family everything in advance, and they do it themselves when the time comes, which has been so gratifying and exciting for us. No, not so far. So far, we have, in certain cases, we've picked up the body at the hospital and brought it over, and they have prepared it at home. These are not autopsied cases. We have not done, for example, you said a bullet wound in the head, someone's been autopsied. We have yet to bring someone like that to a home. If the body was in the right condition, we would, if we were able to bring it to our facility first, do minimal prep and autopsy repair, and then bring it to the home and, be very honest with the family that they're not getting a pristine dead body back. Some people still do want that. So basically, we have a home, we have a crematory, we have a prep room. We can go in, we don't embalm, but we can do repair and prep. We have a chapel where they can come in and just kind of recreate it, sort of, the experience of staying for a couple of hours and just being with the body if they want. Or we would, if they wanted to, we would bring that same body to their home, just making them very aware of what they were going to get into.
Okay, wow. I don't know. How'd you feel about today?
Yeah. Thank you, guys. It was great. Great questions.
Good. Thank you. I really do feel like this is Let's Talk About Death Part 1. Would you come back for another program? Okay. So we're going to ask you to fill out the surveys and then note, if we did Death Part 2, what did we miss today? Because we're librarians, we want to get it right. And I honestly, this so far exceeded my expectations, and I really didn't know what was going to happen. And I think the two of you were just perfect for us. And please, let's thank them again. Let's thank Jenny and Caitlin. Fill out the survey, sign up for Let's Talk Sacramento. Let's talk about, whatever. Go to our website, sign up. There are resources on the website. If you have a really, really good resource, email that email that I talked about earlier, Let's Talk Sacramento at saclibrary.org. And really, it's our job to help people make good decisions and to get you the information you need, but also to have a conversation. This was really, really important. So thank you so much, both of you. Caitlin will be signing books. Stick around. Get to know somebody. Have a creative conversation. Thank you.